We're going to have a look at employment status and contract types, employment law, including discrimination and tribunals, a little bit on recruitment, but obviously not getting the best candidate, because that's what Julie is here to do. And I know you're absolutely waiting for this one, GDPR and HR compliance. I know you're just as excited as I am. We're going to have a break then, and we've got the promise of cakes. And then after that, we're going to talk about managing absence. So it's not just sickness absence, it's managing absence in general. Difficult conversations, which includes disciplinary, grievance, performance and absence, family-friendly policies, and the end of employment. So, a little bit about myself and the HR department. First of all, I'm not a call centre. It's probably easier to tell you what I'm not than what I am. I'm not a call centre. When you call, you get me. You don't get somebody 24 hours a day. I'm conscious now I'm standing right in front of you.
Right, no.
You could look there. It's much closer. And neither, and this might surprise you, neither am I an independent HR consultant. So I have my own business, but I'm not independent because I'm part of a group of consultants around the country. We had our conference on Tuesday and Wednesday of last week, and there are 70 of us in the UK, 11 in Australia, and 5 in Ireland. I'm very keen to see how we can build business there. And we gathered together to do a significant amount of things right across the HR spectrum. And what you get when you phone up or speak is you get the person that is closest to you who wants to understand about your business. Each one of us bring different things to it. My background was American multinationals in Ireland. Prior to that, I was one of the first trainees from Ireland for Marks and Spencer's, and I have to confess I still go into Marks and Spencer's and tidy them all up into size because I just can't stand it. Went back to Ireland, worked for American multinationals, came back here for love, married my husband and worked for 8 years in the NHS. Then I was college head of HR at the University of Birmingham, the College of Medical and Dental Sciences, because you know GPs who are professors. Went from there to being Deputy Director and finally Director of HR at the University of Wolverhampton. And any of you who have ever been involved in HR, and I hate to break it to you, but at some point there will be a restructure and HR will be let go. So I think my last count I'd been made redundant 5 times in 27 years. HR and marketing were always the first out. And then I thought, well, I've always wanted to have my own business, and I started at the beginning of the year. So that is a little bit about me. That's as fast as you're going to get, guys, because the rest of it is about you. So these are the things that we do. You can find out more about that on our website or in your handbook. The one area that I don't do is recruitment, because there are lots of really good, really local, independent consultants who know the candidates in your area and are better served to making sure you get the right person. I can help you with the interviews, I can help you with signing them on, but if you need to find the right candidate for you, then you need to be speaking to Working Solutions in Ludlow. So, dreaded redundancy, and I'm in the middle of doing a huge TUPE at the moment, so. Okay, we add value because we're local and personal, and we want to know about your business, so let's get started. You ready? Mm-hmm. I thought we'll start with the difficult stuff first. So, hands up here who believes they are an employee. An employee in your company. Okay. And hands up those who think that they engage self-employed people. Okay, that was a little bit tentative there. Well done. And hands up those who think they engage workers in the middle. And does anybody know the difference between these 3 categories? Go for it. A couple of hints here.
£5,000.
Apart from that, payroll people. There was method in my madness going round, because payroll people generally know. How do you know when I've got an employee, payroll people? What do I tend to ask you to do?
They'll have a contract, they'll be given you pay them whether you got the work for them to do or not.
I tend to ask you to pay them a salary, don't I? Yeah. I tend to ask you to pay so much per month or week or hour or whatever, but we tend to have a contract of employment, don't we? That usually defines what an employee is. Is it the only thing that defines what an employee is?
Whether they're full-time or part-time.
Oh, but I could be a full-time or part-time independent person, couldn't I?
Holiday entitlement, statutory payments.
Benefits.
There's quite a lot of things define it, isn't it? Anybody heard of the Uber or Pimlico plumber cases? Yeah, we're going to touch a little bit on that and how they determined what the status of those people was not the obvious one. So there are other statuses, directors and office holders and shareholders. Now, directors doesn't necessarily mean someone who might have the title director. Okay, in my previous role, I was director of HR. But that was a title. I wasn't a company director, so I wasn't noted in Companies House as a company director. So when we talk about director in this context, we're typically talking about people who are noted in Companies House as directors. That's not always the case, but typically for an SME, that would be the case. Okay, so let's have a look at what tribunals do. Agency workers, and you had a couple of agency workers at the back. The agency workers regs changed a couple of years ago so that after 12 continuous weeks in a given job, the agency worker would have entitlement to equal treatment. Okay, so we're going to touch on discrimination a little bit later, but anybody not think that equal means the same? Anyone not think equal means the same? Go on, have the courage of your convictions. If you don't think equal means the same.
It could be equal and different.
It can be equal and different. Equality and equal doesn't necessarily mean exactly the same. In this particular case, it means the value of. Yeah, and we'll talk about equality a little bit later, but I just want to make sure everybody's on the same line as me. If I say I'm equal to you, does it mean I am the same to you? And clearly the answer is no, even allowing for the fact that there are two other people from Ireland here, I'm clearly not the same. I might be the same status, I might be roughly the same age, I might have the same terms and conditions, but it doesn't necessarily mean I am the same. So equal to you, so they will have equal working and employment conditions that would apply if they had been recruited directly operating the same job. And that was a big major change, because what used to happen was people would bring in agency workers, let them go, bring them back after 3 weeks, let them go, bring them back, and they didn't have continuity of employment and continuity of service. So the key elements, and this, the payroll people at the back will know this, overtime rates, bonuses and vouchers, the duration of working time, so if it's limited, they will have the same, night work, rest periods, rest breaks, annual leave, and paid time off for antenatal appointments. You need 6 weeks between placements to start the clock. I'm sure you're doing that. 6 weeks between placements. Note to self, 6 weeks between placements. Okay. Agency workers are also entitled to the same access to certain collective facilities provided by the hirer, that's you, the hirer, and to information on relevant job vacancies from the first day of their assignment. Right, what do you think you don't have to offer agency workers?
Sick pay.
Oh, I am going to make you work, guys, come on. What do you think we don't have to offer you?
Pension.
Hint, ask them at the bank. What don't we have to offer agency workers? What distinguishes employees and agency workers?
Benefits.
Such as?
So someone else said pension.
Yeah.
Someone else said sick pay.
Mm-hmm.
Redundancies.
What would you do if you called them in and said, I'm really sorry, that's the end of the job now?
No redundancy pay.
No redundancy payment. So there are certain things that you don't have to offer them. Sick pay. pension, redundancy and benefits in kind. That's why I asked them at the back, first of all, what distinguishes an employee for you? And it is typically around benefits. So the main questions to decide employment status are: is the company obliged to provide work for the person?
Yeah.
Okay, these are the questions you need to be asking yourself. Are you obliged to provide work? Is the person personally obliged to provide the service?
Yes.
Okay? The above two are called the mutuality of obligation. So, those of you who put your hands up and said you were employees, the test for you to be an employee, it isn't the only test, but it is a test, and it would be the biggest one that the tribunal would look at, is what is your basic contract. And 9 times out of 10, the basic contract is, I as the employer expect you to turn up and do the job, and you as the employee expect me to pay you for it. So there is a mutuality of obligation. You have hired me to do a job of work. You might have gone really excited and actually put it in a job description, but the bottom line is you've hired me to do a job of work. And in return, I expect you to pay me for that. You don't expect me to ring in sick and say, I'm not going to be there, but my sister can come in and do it for you. No, because you've contracted with me. So there is a mutuality of obligation there. And that's the third one. Does the person agree to be managed by the company? So again, you're the employer. You expect me to turn up for work. Me, not my sister. You expect me to turn up for work. You also have a reasonable amount of control over me. Now, I'm not talking about cracking the whip and making me work down the mine. I'm talking about the fact that you give me a job to do, you expect me to do it to a certain standard, usually within a particular time, in a particular way. If we're dealing with customers, you expect me to present a particular front to customers. So you have a reasonable amount of control over me, which I agree to. And these are all important things to bear in mind, because these are the ways that we work out whether we've got an employee, a worker, or someone who is self-employed. If the answers to these are yes, then they're going to be an employee. Okay? I seem to have frightened you all into submission. So let's move on really quick. So let's look at status. The status is based on the actual relationship, not the paperwork that was issued. Now that could be a big fright, because there's lots of people out there who think, so long as I just get the contract in place, as long as I get, that 10-page contract, sure, we're fine. As long as I have something that says they're self-employed, then they're self-employed. Yeah? So long as we've got it in writing, sure, aren't tribunals always looking for something in writing? So long as I've got that in writing, then there'll be no confusion. Well, big news flash. Tribunals look at the paperwork, yes, but they also look at the actual relationship. The status is based on the actual relationship, not the paperwork that was issued. Employment tribunals look at the factors to make a balanced decision, and then the test is known as the multiple factor test. Now, if we have a look in our handbooks, the next couple of slides are there to help you make that decision. Okay, so I'm now looking on page 6 of the handbook. This one here. We've got the little blue bit with those questions that I was asking. If the answer to the question is yes, let's have a look at these factors. Okay, so the first one. Is the worker contracted to provide the work personally? Well, for all employees, the answer is going to be yes. Self-employed can send a substitute if unable or unwilling to do the work personally. Okay? Does the worker work exclusively for the other party? Now, as a caveat to that, you could have someone who works part-time for you and part-time for someone else. Exclusively in this context means exclusively for your kind of business. They're not doing a nixer somewhere else for your competitor. Although I have come across that. But generally speaking, they are working exclusively for you. Can they do, if they're self-employed, they can do work under 2 or more contracts with different parties at the same time. You typically see this in policies and procedures in companies where you're saying, whilst you're at work, we expect you to work for us and not be surfing the net doing your eBay business. Yeah, that's usually what it means. Does the worker work as part of others' business? Yes, they're an integral part of your business. No, they work as and when required. And does the worker provide their own equipment? No, the employer provides all the tools, machinery and equipment required. And if they're self-employed, they most often provide their own tools and equipment. There's a quiz question coming up on this. Does the worker provide their own support staff? Well, if they're an employee, you as the employer are providing all the support staff. If they're self-employed, they're bringing in that additional resource as required. Are they responsible for the profit and loss? No, they're not. As part of the normal employment contract, you would ask them to take care of your goods and services and look out for reasonable damage. But over here, they can charge you what they like, can't they? And tax, national insurance and VAT arrangements are usually dealt with by colleagues at the back, subject to PAYE rules. And here, they produce their own accounts and usually invoice you. Okay? That's what a tribunal looks at. It doesn't necessarily look at the contract that you may have issued saying you're self-employed. This is the important one. Is the arrangement designed purely to achieve tax advantages and/or to avoid employment legislation? Hands up those of you who have actually issued contracts within 8 weeks of somebody starting, employment contracts. Okay, hands up those of you, and you can keep your hand down if you like, but nod your head. If you've held on until they've done their probation, just to see if they suit, or if you've said if they're an internship they don't really need a contract, or if they're going to have less than 2 years service, they don't really need a contract. So, have you done an arrangement purely to avoid your obligations under the law? So you haven't issued something because you think they don't need it. Does the worker receive paid holiday sick pay and be eligible for a company pension scheme? And are they subject to disciplinary action in the event of misconduct or poor work performance? If you're self-employed, you're not subject to disciplinary action. You are just simply let go, aren't you? Okay. So, employees are entitled to certain employment rights.
Sorry, can I just ask
Yeah,
a question?
absolutely.
When it comes to the, is the worker subject to disciplinary action?
Mm-hmm.
So, you were saying before that if they were in place for 12 weeks and they got the benefits, but so they get the benefits if they're in place for 12 weeks, but they don't get the...
They do, the rights and responsibilities. They get the rights, but they also get the responsibilities. Yes, because a contract exists. The contract is, you expect me to turn up and do the job that you have outlined to the best of my ability.
Yeah.
With certain behaviours. So yes, I would be subject to restrictions, if you like.
Right, okay.
Yeah, but there's a difference between you bringing me down a disciplinary route if I was your employee, so there would be a proper process because I would have entitlements under the law, and if you brought me in as a contractor, so I was invoicing you. So what would you do if somebody was invoicing you, but actually you didn't like the quality of their work? You'd give them notice, wouldn't you? You wouldn't have to discipline them because they're not your employee. So employees are entitled to certain employment rights. This is a good question because it hit this slide perfectly. They're entitled to certain employment rights. They're entitled to be issued with a written particulars of employment, which we colloquially call the contract, but actually the contract in law is you turf up and I pay you. That's it. It's the same kind of contract as if I go into a shop and buy something. I expect it to be of a particular quality because I've paid money for it. It has its roots in that. They have the right not to be unfairly dismissed, and we'll go through the different kinds of dismissal. They have the right to receive statutory redundancy pay on redundancy, to receive notice of termination of employment, to receive guaranteed payments in respect of layoff and short-time working, and receive itemised pay statements. Is it me or is it very warm in here? Can we open the door at the back, or can we open the window? Yeah, please. Okay, and they have the right to be paid statutory sick pay, to take maternity, paternity, adoption and or parental leave and be paid statutory, maternity, paternity, adoption and or shared parental pay as appropriate, to take parental leave and time off for family emergencies, to request flexible working, and that's all employees, not just flexible working for childcare, that's all employees, and this is the biggie. Not receive less favourable treatment by virtue of the fact that they're on a fixed term contract. Okay? You all look terrified. I'll see what I can do to make things better.
May I ask a question?
Please do, yeah.
You're entitled to SSP even if it doesn't have it in your contract?
Yes.
I was asked this afternoon.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Sorry.
It's all right.
We'll go through that there. I have a whole section on managing absence. Okay, so workers. Remember my little bit in the middle? So I've got my employees. We all have a good grasp of employees now. The mutuality of obligation bit, remember? And you've got a whole grid that tells you, well, do they have this? Do they have that? Do they have the other? Then they're an employee. So employees over here, you expect them to turf up for work. I expect you to pay me. And my colleagues down the back are going to give me, at the very least, an itemised pay statement, yeah? And then I have my self-employed over that side. I can substitute somebody if I want to. It can be my sister if I want her to do it. I will invoice you. I am not subject to disciplinary proceedings. I can make money off it. So I'm over the other side. Do you remember my box in the middle? The workers. So they're neither fish nor fowl. They're the ones in the middle. Workers are entitled to certain employment rights, and these are your agency workers, but not exclusively your agency workers, because there's other workers as well. They receive paid annual leave. They have limited working time. They have rest breaks. Let's have a look at a couple of other ones. They are entitled to be paid the national minimum wage, not to have unlawful deductions made from wages, not receive less favourable treatment, and to be protected from discrimination. Okay, so they're the ones in the middle. And finally, they receive equal pay and conditions for equal work. So they're my ones in the middle, and they're not that different from employees, are they? And we're going to hit the tribunal now in a minute. But first, I want to talk to you about the Revenue Commissioners. There is this big myth out there that the Revenue Commissioners and tribunals look at the same thing. They don't. The Revenue Commissioners will come and look at deductions, what you've done in terms of VAT or PAYE, and they may not come to the same conclusion as a tribunal will about the status of your workers. So just because the Revenue Commissioners told you you were fine, they're all self-employed, does not mean a tribunal will come to the same conclusion. So, Weight Watchers, and you can tell that I don't do Weight Watchers, I do Slimming World, it's a lot easier. Weight Watchers had contracts stating that their meeting leaders were independent contractors. The leaders, so the people who were running the meetings, believed that they were self-employed and that they paid their own national insurance and tax. The leaders could offer a substitute leader, but WW, as they like to be called now, could veto that person. The leaders could arrange for the class times and dates, but WW outlined how the classes should be run. The leaders could profit by selling more products, however they can only sell WW products. And the leaders could stop working for WW without notice. So a claim went to the tribunal to establish whether they were employees or self-employed. What do you think the decision was? Have a chat amongst yourselves for a minute or so and see what you think the decision was and why. It's a true case, guys, it's not. And I didn't put up Uber or Pimlico plumbers because I thought you'd all know that one. But if you want to say it, why would you want to say it? What is the bit that's...
Because if they're self-employed, they could take the rest.
But I might do that if I'm self-employed. You might say, well, I want a particular standard. You're going to put your bathroom in, I want it to, you know, when I turn the taps on, I want water to flow.
They've got to veto them and check that they're okay.
I think sometimes when we come to self-employed, we get ourselves very tied up in detail. Okay, hands up those of you who think that they are employees, that the tribunal decided they're employees. 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Ooh. Hands up those of you who think they're self-employed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We scratching, or is that a 5? Okay. The answer is they're employees. The tribunal decided they're employees. Anybody want to go out on a limb who said they were employees as to why you thought they were employees?
Of course, they were tied to WW with their products and everything.
No?
No?
I could be tied to, Julia could have said quite reasonably, if we were in a contracting arrangement, Julia could have said quite reasonably, I'd like you to wear a polo shirt with the new brand on it.
Is it because WW could say no to the person that if they wanted to substitute someone in?
Bang on.
I mean, I thought
That is exactly why. And you've got to go back to remember your mutuality of obligation, your 3 questions. Could they substitute? Yes, they could substitute, but Weight Watchers could veto the person that I might bring in to do the class instead of me. Guess how much it cost them? £23 million in back pay and taxes. Yeah. So employment national insurance. Because all these leaders, and if you think now in Ludlow there must be at least 3 Weight Watcher groups in the Ludlow area. Now multiply that out by every town in the country, 23 million. Because the tribunal said even though every single leader was registered with HMRC and was gleefully paying their tax and national insurance, the tribunal said because they did not have complete freedom and autonomy of how to do this, which included substitution, they were employees. Pimlico plumbers, remember Pimlico plumbers over the summer? The guy in the kind of the flash suit with the mullet and the guy who took him to court? Loads of people think that the reason why it was established that he was a worker / employee was because Pimlico plumbers provided the van, the tools and the uniform. That's perfectly reasonable. You can have a contractor come in and provide a van, tools and uniform. I have a client who has 40 subcontractors because they do event management. And for health and safety reasons, they all have to wear a highly visible uniform. It's for a health and safety reason. And that the kit that they use is very technical medical kit. So it's unreasonable to ask them to provide that. The reason why Pimlico plumbers lost their case and the guy was deemed to be an employee was because he had to book holidays. His time was not his own. So the company was under no obligation to provide him with work, but he was under an obligation to do it. If he wasn't available, he had to book holidays. So he couldn't just say.
I lost it because of that as well. I lost the tribunal exactly because of that. It was on, a photograph was actually taken on the work roster and the holidays, and that lady's name was on there.
Yeah, as
That's
opposed
what I
to
lost.
not
Although
being available if you call him up.
The HMRC told me that the lady was self-employed.
Yeah.
She went right, she asked,
Yeah.
she sent in invoices every month. So she was, as far as I was concerned, she was self-employed.
You job done,
And I
which is
lost-
why I'm saying HMRC and tribunal, not one and the same thing.
I'm sorry, listen, that happened 2 years ago. This
You
lady-
wish you knew me then, didn't you? Even though you're from Meath, never mind. So still, North County Dublin, just above North County Dublin, I'll stick with you. So these are really, there's a reason why we spend so much time at the beginning of this talking about worker and employment status, because everything else stems from that. If in doubt, take out the front of your workbook and go through those questions. Am I doing this? Is there mutuality of obligation? And if in doubt, even though it might cost you a little bit more, if in doubt, put them on the payroll. Because not only will you be fined for what you haven't paid them, you will be then fined. So it's not just back pay, it's the fine. I mean, 23 million for a company of Weight Watchers size, and that was just the UK. That's not small beans.